chat during our icebreaker and Q&A session. While using the chat, we encourage you to be respectful and use friendly language. I will be sending out our speakers' biographies in the Zoom chat, which you can take a look to know more about our panelists. Our moderator for tonight is Giselle Marcus from Links Archway. She is a TEDx speaker and an operations executive. With that being said, I will hand it over to Giselle.
Thank you, Nancy. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us here on a Friday. It's an evening where you could be somewhere else, so we thank you for being with us today. And I am so delighted that the Links Incorporated Archway, Missouri chapter is in partnership with Vitendo for Africa. We are an international nonprofit organization that consists of approximately 16,000 professional women of African descent in 292 chapters across 41 states here in the U.S., Washington, D.C., and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and the United Kingdom. Our members are rooted in sharing of sisterhood and service activities, sustaining and ensuring the cultural and economic survival of African Americans and other persons of African ancestry. Myself and Nanette, that's on the meeting with us tonight, represent the chairwomen of the International Trends and Services facet, which provides services and delivers programs to people of African ancestry globally so that they may have a better quality of life. Programs are designed and developed in terms of education, health, and cultural needs of our global community. I'm pleased to be with you on this evening with this amazing topic. Africa is a continent that's dear to my heart. It is definitely a favorite. I actually did an expat assignment in Johannesburg, South Africa, and it was one of the most richest experiences having the opportunity to work there. And because I love the continent so much, myself and my mother have visited about 12 countries there. So I'm delighted to be here with you all. I am delighted to introduce our panelists on this evening. We have 4 panelists. 2 of them are from Vitendo for Africa, Dr. Mati and Sylvia. And there are 2 representing the Links of Archway, Missouri, both Patricia and Esther. So I wanted to thank all 4 of them for being with us on this evening and volunteering their time and their talent with us. I'm going to introduce each one of them by name and what they do professionally, and then I'm going to ask each one of them to share a personal experience relevant to this evening's theme. Dr. Mati, I'm going to start with her. She is an instructor in the Division of Infectious Disease at the School of Medicine at Washington University. Her primary focus is on patients living with HIV and COVID. Within this population, she is most interested in marginalized populations, disparities in care, women, and quality improvement. I also would like to add she's very popular because she's also a speaker for another Links event in regard to the topic of COVID in a few weeks. So welcome, Dr. Mati.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I was fortunate enough to join this country back in 2001, and I came here to further my education in medicine. At the time, my country of Zimbabwe had been devastated by the impact of HIV, and I had lost a matriarch in our family to it, whose only wrong, if you can only call that, was being faithful to a husband who was unfaithful to her. And that was the impetus for me coming here. And since then, coming here, I have benefited from being part of this rich and beautiful culture within the African American community. And I've always been discouraged by some of the division that I've often seen occur when we are one. I mean, we come from the same roots, the same culture. And so I am so honored to have this opportunity to come here tonight to really break down where some of that misunderstanding, some of that divisiveness comes in, and to really talk about the shared experiences, even though we've been on different parts of the world, that should really dispel some of this and have us come together at a time where a time that quite frankly calls for it, with the experience we've just come from in this country. So appreciate the platform, and I'm so looking forward to this great discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Mati. Now I would like to introduce Patricia Sanders, also called Pat. She's a native to St. Louis and has been an educator for over 40 years from preschool to secondary school. And she's taught both underachievers and gifted students. Pat, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. And thank you for offering me this opportunity to participate as a panelist. As a child, the only images of Africans that my friends and I had were negative stereotypes, similar to the Africans portrayed in the old Tarzan movies and the old King Kong movies. And then I even remember a child's storybook called Little Black Sambo. And because of those negative images, none of us wanted to associate ourselves with Africans. But 24 years ago, my school sponsored me on a cross-cultural educational trip to Senegal, West Africa. And the first thing that I realized was that everybody looked like me. And I mean that literally. So many of them resembled people I knew back in the States, my family, my Black friends, even baby pictures of myself. And it was then that this trip awakened me to my connection to West Africa and my newfound pride in my heritage.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. Next, I'd like to welcome Sylvia Karaka. She is a registered nurse and case manager and is a native of Kenya. And she has lived in the St. Louis area for 20 years. She has served in various healthcare roles, working with diverse populations in both the hospital and community settings. Sylvia, welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And I am so glad to be here today. And yes, I did immigrate from Kenya in the early 2000s. I was a young teenager. And when I landed here, it was a struggle. I never felt like I fitted anywhere. I didn't feel like I was fitting in this community. I just felt lost. And there's a lot of misconceptions that happened between the two communities. But my changing point was as a nurse working in the home care setting. I was serving the St. Louis City population, elderly people, and there was such a huge connection. And I realized there's so much more that we are similar and so much more that we share. And that was the awakening moment for me to realize, you know what, this is something that we should pursue. We should get to know each other and understand each other and maybe try and dispel some of the miscommunications that's going on between the two communities. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sylvia. Next, I'd like to introduce Esther Walker. She has a designation as a professional engineer and works for the Chicago Public School District as a facility manager. Welcome, Esther. Is Esther on mute?
Okay, there we go, off mute.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Giselle, for the warm introduction, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in this evening. My name is Esther Kwabia Walker, and my family, we are from Ghana. My parents met years ago in the 60s in college, and my dad came from Ghana on a cargo ship through Liberia. So many, many moons ago, but I spent my entire childhood life and a lot of my adult life spending my summers in Ghana. I've grown up here, like a lot of my cousins who either were born here or came here as very young children. So we are Westernized, but always Ghanaian at heart. Currently, my parents live in Ghana, and they are living through the pandemic on the mountain in Late. But I feel fortunate to have had the experiences of being in both places, in both continents, in Ghana and in America. And I think it completely shaped how I see the world, see how things happen from just a global perspective, and how each little thing, it's not just one thing, but to look at the bigger picture and how we got here and what that really means. So thank you again for having me.
All right. Thank you, Esther. Okay, this is going to be an opportunity for some audience participation. I'm going to ask for Aranola to help in terms of surveying the audience this evening. I have a question for you all, and questions mean that we'll be looking for some answers. And what I'd like is for, if you'd be willing to answer the question, to please raise your hand using the Zoom function, and Aranola will call on you. And the question that I would like to ask is, would you be willing to share with us something about the alternative culture that you have come to enjoy? So for example, if you're an African American, what is it about our African immigrants that you've come to love and enjoy? And if you are an African immigrant, what is it that you've come to love and enjoy about the African American culture? Aranola?
Yes, I'm here and I'm monitoring the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had been warned this is not a quiet group.
We can use the chat function, correct?
You can.
Yes, ma'am, you can. Yes.
Well, Africans are never quiet.
Right, that's right. So no need to be shy tonight.
Pauline has her hand up.
Okay, we'll call on Olin. Please go ahead.
My name is Fanai Dadi. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I came here 18 years ago. So you can understand from my accent, I still have my African accent. So what I like from the African American culture is always you find something that is similar, from you, where you came from. What I like the most is the extended family, the care. I have experience of seeing a family taking care of their dad. They didn't want to let him go to nursing home. So they were 5 sisters and a brother. They took care of their dad until he died. So that part of it is, I can say this is typically African. So that's what I like the most, taking care of each other.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing with us.
Greetings. I'm Theta Person, and I'm from America. I just love difference. My name is different. Theta is different, and I just love accepting differences, finding out about different things. I love the way my friends who are from Africa, like I have friends who graduated with me who are from the Congo, co-workers. I worked with, in the past, with a family that's from Nigeria, and I taught in schools with some Nigerians. So it's just all around me, and just knowing that I'm here in America and wondering what the experience was in another country. I've always been interested in that. And even though I have freckles and I'm a lighter complexion, in my family, I have different colors. I mean, but with my mother and my father, my family, we range different colors. So just wondering where everything came from is just interesting to me. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. I would like to share something. My name is Arinola Solanki. I am a volunteer for Vincenzo for Africa. One thing I noticed, because I also own my own business, is the similarities between the older Black Americans to my grandmothers and aunties. I think they share a lot of things in common in terms of just their values and what they count as important. I see a lot of similarities between how my auntie thinks and what she would say, and my older Black American clients. And just in general, when I first came to America, one thing that struck me was how beautiful the Black Americans were. I just thought, wow, I used to tease back then that, wow, I've not found an ugly one yet. You know, just the way that they take care of themselves and just that sense of appreciation and self-worth. And it's something that I have learned from. Those are some of the things I appreciate and I admire.
I think Bella from in the chat, her camera and mic are not working. She stated that I'm African from Kenya, and what I've come to love about African American culture is the courage to fight all the racism that happens in the USA for many years, like with Martin Luther King and all the others. It reminds us of the fighting African spirit. We should all unite, and I totally agree with what Bella has stated.
Hi, I'm Pauline Gray, and everyone is from Africa or America, and I'm going to put it together. When the ship stopped, it stopped in Jamaica, and I am a Jamaican descendant of Africa. I'm Jamaican African, but how I check the box, it's very complicated for me. I think coming here to America is so different, and listening to everybody, bridging that, for me, it's almost like I'm in the middle. It's almost like I'm in purgatory in seeing the difference and seeing the fighting spirit of Jamaicans that have that African fighting spirit that I still have, and sometimes put me against the grain here in America, that I feel like, where do I belong? I don't know. I'm searching. And for 41 years, I'm in tears because I'm still fighting for my people. And I am happy to see that you guys can come together, but there is still people on the fringes of both structures that are looking for a place to land.
Thank you, Pauline, for sharing and for being, so intimate with us on this evening. And that is
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. You're fine. We thank you for sharing with us and being comfortable enough to do so, because what Nancy and I meant to share too, if we did not, is we really wanted this to be a forum where people could be comfortable, in really sharing, because it's quite clear, generally, the misconceptions that do exist, we often don't have an opportunity to get them resolved or talk to someone about it without being possibly made to feel uncomfortable. So this space and this virtual room, the intention of it is to be a comfortable space where we can have this type of dialogue, Pauline. So I thank you for sharing your experience with us tonight and for joining us on this evening.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Let's call on Ingrid Taylor. She's raising her hand as well.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. It is truly an honor to be here and to share. I want to talk about religion. And I can remember traveling to Johannesburg and going to a restaurant, and there was a group, there was a choir that sang Amazing Grace. And they were all South Africans, and they were singing Amazing Grace for us, the Americans. And their accent, their emphasis, it was as if I had went to my own Baptist church. And what the epiphany for me was that how I feel about religion, what enthralls me about my God, is rooted from the people I am from. And, you know, in the United States, we talk about gospel and gospel singing. And, you know, that's an African American genre. But if you go to Africa and you hear people sing the same song who have never heard African Americans sing the song, you recognize as an African American that song, that spirit that we have is still with us, and it came from our forefathers from Africa. And I'm just very happy to share that experience.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you very much. Can we call on Brian now? Brian, go ahead, please.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Brian Ballet. I am from Sierra Leone, West Africa. Which everybody know, the best country in West Africa, and arguably the best country in Africa as well.
No, don't go that way.
So yeah. One thing I want to say about my brothers and sisters is that they started the motion for fighting for liberation.
Yeah.
Because of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, especially African American, that's one of the reasons why most of the African country gained their independence. You know, because all of the the first head of state came to America. They came to study, and they were influenced by the idea of revolution. And then they took those ideas and went back to the continent and stood up against, you know, colonial power. And we're still fighting this colonial power today. And I'm always so happy and liberated whenever I'm around my African American friends, because they always tell us that, you know, the fighting is not over. We must fight, not only fight for liberation, we also must fight to unite one another, because there are so many system that has been put against us in terms of like culturally, mentally, systematically. When you look at the African education system, you know, it's rooted in the colonial mindsets. When you look at America, you know, the culture or the propaganda, everything is rooted against, you know, us. And it is necessary for us to unpack all of these things. Why do we have the ideas the way we have about one another? When it comes to tribalism, when it comes to colorism, you know, when it comes to, you know, classism, we need to figure out why are we fighting one another? And why do we, and some of us, we don't really know the answers to it, because this is a thing that have been, you know, embedded in us growing up as a child. And our fathers and our great-grandfathers never really honestly explained to us, why do we have this mindset? And I think this generation, this time is it's relevant for us to unpack these things and understand from our own perspective, rather than looking at a tunnel view, or rather than looking at the single story that we have had since, you know, growing up in Africa or growing up, you know, in the States. You know, panel like this is very important. And I urge everybody, you know, to take the step further, reach out to people from the opposite group. Say, hey, I would like to learn more about your story. I would like to get to know you. I don't want to know you based on what I've seen in the TV or what I've heard about Africans or African American. You know, let us individually take our own step, take this mantle, you know, and control this narrative of our life and saying, I'm taking this step to know better. I'm taking this step to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Before we call on Pauline, there's a note here on the chat from Charles. He said, hey, I'm from Kenya. I love it when I interact with African Americans at work and they refer to me as bro. We have extended this to our white brothers and sisters, and we work as one happy family. Thank you, Charles. Pauline, you can go ahead now, please.
I think I already talked about it. I guess I need to take down my hand because I think I said my piece and just want to listen right now and try to be a part of this group.
Okay. If you already spoken, if you can take your hands down here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aranola. I appreciate you helping with the chat, and thank you so much for everyone who has participated in the dialogue. I'm going to segue us into the panel discussion. And what I'm going to ask, because it's difficult for me to see everyone while I'm speaking, so I am going to call upon one of our panelists with a question, and the other panelists can feel free, if they'd like to add something, to feel free just to go ahead and do so. I don't know that I'll be able to see you if you're raising your hand, so just go ahead and jump into the conversation. What I will do, hopefully you can see me, I will, and when we're at time for that question, I'll just, I'll try to raise my hand. So hopefully you'll see my reaction, because I definitely don't want to interrupt the rich dialogue that we're about to have. Okay. So the first question that I have, I'd like to pose to Esther, and that is, can you recall the point in your life when you became consciously aware of your Blackness and that of different cultures present in the African diaspora? What contributed to this awareness, and how did it impact you, Esther?
Well, I would say there's a couple of time periods that I became aware of, as you say, my Blackness, or I would call it my Africanness. And for me, I didn't know any different. I just always thought we grew up in our household, and I was maybe more aware when I started going to school here. And so in our house, it's normal to eat. You eat fufu, and you eat rice, and you eat soup and stew and some other traditional African things like you might eat with your fingers. You'll have yam and plantain and, you know, all the things where I'd say, oh, I want French fries at McDonald's. And my mom would say, oh, eat this fried plantain. It's close enough. You know, those kind of things. So that's normal in the house. But when you go to school and you start to have friends and they ask, well, what did you have for dinner last night? And people talk about, oh, we had chicken, we had, you know, burgers, we had, well, what did you have? Oh, we had fufu with groundnut stew. And you have to explain what that is and why you're having it and where does that come from. So at an early age, you start to understand that you're slightly different. You all look the same, and everybody's got brown skin. Or schools I went to, it was mixed, various people, but that's the point where you start to have to explain. Some explanations went well, some not so well. And then just a little older in life, high school. So high school, I remember high school history. And as a student, I got A's. Math was very easy for me. It was just on the path of you're going to be an engineer. That's just what it was. There's no questions asked. This is the life path. And in Ghana, you go down the tech path or the non-tech path. And even though we were here in America, I was going down the tech path. My dad went down the tech path. My mom is a retired teacher, but he decided that's what I was going to do. I liked it, and I was on board, and that's okay, and that's fine. But in high school history, I remember one of my teachers, Mr. Beveridge. I'll never forget him. I went to Whitney Young High School in Chicago, and that's the same high school that Michelle Obama went to. And yeah, she's a bit older than me, a few years. She's got me by a few years, but it's the same school. But regardless, history class, and we're talking about just different time periods, the colonial time period and the Renaissance time period. But most of these things were Caucasian-based time periods. And I realized that for people who look like me, we were slaves in history. And then the next time period for us was the Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and then that's it. And I rebelled against those things in a quiet way. But it was a very definite stance, and I refused to participate. And we sat in alphabetical order in class. So being a W, I was usually in the back, in a corner someplace, but I actively didn't participate, wasn't interested. And then the teacher asked me a couple times, well, why aren't you asking anything? Why aren't you talking about anything? I said, because none of this relates to me. There are no people here that look like me. You don't respect us. And then I start giving some African history, and we are great. And I had a whole lot to say. And that happened a few times. And so eventually, yes, my parents were called regularly. And then I was actively getting a D in class. But that was intentional, just to prove a point, because I would tell them all the time, I'm not interested in this. It doesn't portray us well. This is not accurate. But I was very confident of those things at an early age. So those were those beginning points where I realized that I just had to take a stance. And it was actually my mom that turned me around, and in a way to where I could relate, and I started doing better and actually learning. She's saying, you know, your grades are representative of everything. And so if you have an F here, that would look bad. And I say, oh, that could impact me going to college. Okay. And that made me get it together. But those things are interesting. And then as I went into my college years and into the 20s, and I started traveling around America. I was previously younger, traveled internationally, but as a family, most of our travels were going to visit the African relatives that lived someplace else, like somewhere, you know, Europe or wherever. But most of that was based on going to visit our African relatives. And as a kid, I used to say with some of my friends, everybody say they're going down south and for the summer and going to these places. And I used to ask, Dad, why do we always have to go there? Why can't we just go to Mississippi like everybody else? Why can't we go to Louisiana and some of these other places? But looking back at that, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And I wouldn't have been able to, you know, go against my teacher like that in a vocal but educated resistance with knowledge, had I have not spent that time in Ghana and known better. And when I would be in Ghana, we just didn't go for the summer, but I always had a tutor set up who was there. So, you know, math was continuous, reading was continuous, English was continuous, and it was speaking proper English, correct English, learning how to speak and spell and write, and learn where you are from. And here, let's go to the village and all of these places. So had I not had those experiences, I wouldn't have even been able to nicely or quietly rebel against some things that I didn't think were fully accurate. And yes, those pieces in history, those things did occur, you know, British history, European history, and that's fine. My only issue was that it didn't give a bigger picture into African and descendants of African people and all the positive contributions. And so me going to Ghana, I grew up on seeing all the people who look like me in all the capacities. They were, you know, doctors and lawyers and heads of states and presidents and all of these kind of things. And so there never was any mental block of what you can't do or what you shouldn't do. And, oh, you're Black, why are you thinking about that? Never came to it. So.
Thank you, Esther, for sharing with us, you know, how you showed up in the classroom. And I think that is some of the fighting spirit that some of the other participants were speaking of tonight.
May I offer a couple of comments, because that was one of my favorite questions. And I marvel at the experiences that Esther had that contrast sharply with mine. I'm from St. Louis, and I grew up in the late 40s, early 50s. And at that time, the polite term for African Americans was colored and Negro. And if anything, although we had positive self-esteem, we had poor racial esteem. And I didn't realize it until, as a child, my favorite activity was coloring in coloring books. Guess what color I colored all the people in coloring books, and I wasn't the only one. We used the orange crayon. It never occurred to us to color the people the same color as ourselves. It was my father who asked me, why are you using an orange crayon? Why don't you use a brown one? And then years later, I began to see schools try to instill that racial esteem in their kids. And as early as the kindergarten, they would have Black children cut out silhouettes of themselves from brown, what is it called? It's the brown paper, butcher paper. And they would do that. But I grew up being ashamed of my Black features, my lips, my nose. I had a fair-skinned high school classmate, very fair-skinned. And she told me, oh, Patricia, your nose spreads all across your face every time you laugh. And I remember being so ashamed of that I would take the time every morning trying to pull my nostrils to make them sharper. But it took my college experiences when I began to see different African Americans and the attitudes. And I have to admit, a brother called me his chocolate pudding. Well, that really did it. And then I remember there was a white male in college who thought that I was beautiful. Not beautiful for a dark-skinned girl, but just beautiful. And eventually I began to accept who I was, my darker coloring, my kinky hair, my broad nostrils, my thick lips, all of that. So it became an evolution. So that's how I became conscious of my Blackness.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pat, for sharing that very, very personal testament about yourself. Next, I would like to call upon Dr. Mati for a question. What do you believe are the reasons why colonization in the African continent and slavery of African Americans are often not viewed with a similar lens? Yes, they are different. However, both include exploitation of Black bodies, Black resources, and in a way, colonialism can be viewed as a new form of oppression after the abolition of the slave trade.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I believe that this is a failure to understand the history of our two descendant cultures. I believe that because of the difference in the way that our cultures look currently, there is a difficulty in identifying with those roots. So let's explore that briefly. I know that for a lot of Americans, you don't typically associate your own history with Africa's. But once you see the similarities, it's impossible to overlook. Slavery has an absolutely long-standing human practice that stretches far back into our world's history. It's played an enormous part in determining the economies of our countries and the cultural past and future. And both America and Africa have actually really felt the fire of slavery. So during the construction of the New World, America used slavery as a means to advance economically. Europeans used slavery long before traveling to the New World. And so the influence was felt early in those colonial days. When the United States did officially break free from Britain, the relationship between slavery and African-American descent was strong. The divide between the white America and African-American races was obvious, physically and in every standpoint. But the slave trade in Africa had its share of similarities, right? What was happening there is that there's a common misconception that the slave trade only existed in Europe and America. But in reality, there was a slave trade happening actively on my continent, right? And it was prominent within those boundaries. Within our own tribes, we were known to sell each other. For example, tribes could be geographical neighbors, but enemies of different descent. West African kings were known to dominate their neighbors. An illustration of this is a king, Zinga Vemba of Congo, who was known as having a strong alliance with Europeans and therefore could have more power over his neighbors. This cycle of supremacy led to a vicious cycle of enslavement of neighbors in order to protect their own people. It didn't have a positive impact on Africa's well-being, but we know that here on this continent, it had a positive impact. You know, the future, the present of this country is built on the back of slavery. On my continent, it was destructive. It actually tore down our economies, and we've had to post-colonially build that. But we need to understand tonight that history of slavery is very parallel. Exploitation happened on both continents. Destruction of families happened on both continents. Removal of family ties happened on both continents. This is a very real history. When I first moved here, one of my first interactions with an African American was in an airport that I was connecting a flight in Chicago. And one of the bag attendants was talking to me as I was waiting for baggage and asked where I was from, and I told him. He said, well, you're going to have a tough time here, sister, because a lot of African Americans do not like Africans. And I asked him why. And he said, because you sold us into slavery. That us versus them, instead of understanding that we were having a shared experience historically that binds us, that understanding that to Trump, to other racist Americans, we are seen as exactly the same. We cannot continue to have this us versus them dialogue. So my understanding that because my accent is different from yours, because the way I dress is different from you, because the food I eat is different from yours, because we've labeled stereotypes in the present time. Nigerian men are aggressive. African-American men do not court. We are now placing labels that have prevented us from seeing our united history. So let us empower ourselves now by learning that history, understanding our shared experiences, understanding that to everyone who oppresses us in this country, we are exactly the same, and move forward united. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mati. Very interesting account. And I agree with you that, we're talking about the differences and misconceptions, but in many ways, as you have stated very plainly, the cultures are very similar. Sylvia, I have a question for you. According to historians, albeit a small part, several African kingdoms engaged in the development of the Atlantic slave trade by selling their war prisoners to Europeans in exchange for goods. Do you believe there is a sense of resentment present among African Americans towards Africans for this role in slavery? Touch base on slavery based on economic reasons by Africans versus racial bias via Europeans/Americans.
Thank you so much, Giselle. And I think this question flows really well with what Dr. Mati just shared. It is an interesting question. And yes, I have heard of this question before, more in a social, fun setting. Hey, your ancestors sold my ancestors. If we really just pause and think some more about this question, there may be some perceptions and maybe some information to this. But I believe that this theory further drives a wedge between the two communities, between the African-American descendants and the African descendants. So let me explain. When we say the trade that the Africans were trading other Africans, was it really fair trade? For it to be fair trade, you have to, the two goods that are being exchanged have to give a fair value and equal value. So if we look back, do we really know who sold who and why? What came about for them to even to start these transactions? Was it even a fair value? So our history does tell us that some of the goods that were exchanged were, maybe spices, fine clothing, firearms in exchange for human beings. So those, when the Africans truly, if the Africans did get those goods and exchanged humans for to the Europeans, the humans, that was free labor that, as we know, and it is very well documented in history, has been used over and over. Their children, their grandchildren, they were used for free labor for years and generations, as we know, and actually happens up to today. So I feel like this theory and this question just drives a wedge between the two communities. And it is one of the misconceptions that we really need to tread carefully, maybe pause, think some more about it, find some more information truly about that. And then that way, I still believe that at this point, to even have that question lingering over us, it just, that wedge between the two communities, we cannot come together. But we do have so much more that we can share together as a community, as opposed to, you know, going back to things that happened that in this generation, that you didn't have anything to do with that. I did not have anything to do with that. But if you, and I believe, in a way, I do believe as well that if you just share that Africans were selling other Africans, does it diminish the effects of the slavery as far as the Europeans thinking that, you know, hey, you guys were already enslaving each other, you sold your people to us, you know, and that is, I really don't believe that that is something we really want to, you know, focus on. We should focus on coming together and bring both communities again together. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Sylvia. Pat, I have a question for you, and that is, in your opinion, how has the exploitation of the African diaspora manifested differently between the two cultures? And if you can speak to how it did so economically and how it did so socially, that would be great.
Okay. Well, first of all, both systems of segregation were dehumanizing, they were brutalizing, and violent against Black people. Now, in the United States, after the Civil War, the Confederate states, these were the states in the South, developed what they called Black codes. And these codes, or a system of laws, were designed to limit the freedom of the new freed African Americans. And eventually, these Black codes evolved into what we call Jim Crow laws between 1874 and 1975. They mandated separate but equal treatment for Blacks, such as public transportation, schools, hotels, restaurants, water fountains, etc. And although these facilities were separate but equal, they were vastly inferior for those people of color. There was police violence against Blacks, which is obviously still with us today. And then there was the separation of the races. They were not allowed to have intimate relationships, what we call miscegenation laws. These laws prohibited marriage between Blacks and whites. And in the United States, they were not officially struck down until the Supreme Court ruling in 1967. So these are just a few similarities. Black life with apartheid were similar, although both systems mandated separation of Blacks and whites. Apartheid was a national system, whereas Jim Crow, for the most part, was a regional system, specifically to the South.
Thank you. Would any of the other panelists like to weigh in on that? Okay, thank you, Pat. Next question. I think you really touched upon it. You really touched upon the differences and the similarities in the oppression between African Americans in the States and Jim Crow, and also in Africa. And to that, I would just add, when I went to the Apartheid Museum, I remember there was a picture of the police, you know, looking or peering into the window of a home. And they were doing that, you know, to see if there was a relationship between, an African, an African and someone that was Caucasian in color, I guess is what I would call it. And it was just really interesting to me that the police authorities, right, would go to that measure. It's not just a matter of seeing them out publicly, but actually peering into the windows. So really getting into the personal lives of people. And as you said, the fact that in the United States, that didn't get abolished until the 60s. I mean, that's like very recent. So very interesting account. So with that, we're a little earlier on time. I'm actually going to go to the Q&A and have the audience weigh in. I'm going to ask for Arinola's help. I can see there's a number of questions in the chat. So I'm going to ask Arinola for you to please lead the Q&A by calling on some of our participants in the audience to see if they have questions, or if you would like to call out some of the questions that are in the chat.
Okay.
I will give you the floor.
I have a question.
Very much. Okay, let's take it to my, just give me a second. Let me
take your time.
Okay. It's a good discussion. Ajua said, yes, it's a good discussion. It will be the same color. I think what we have now was just a comment from Chief Sylvia. As Chief Silva, Jim Crow was a form of apartheid, American apartheid. I think agreeing with what you said earlier, were they really equal? That's a question. Can a TIDA person expand on that? Were they really equal?
Basically, I was just wondering, I'm the person, since Ms. Sanders was mentioning how things were separate, and just because someone says that they're equal does not mean they're equal. So maybe the black water fountain, for example, maybe it was dingy and dirty and nasty, but it functioned. So that's not really equal. So I'm just saying sometimes things are set up to look as if they are equal, but actually they're not equal.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. As a matter of fact, perhaps I should have emphasized that although it was considered equal, separate but equal, the facilities for Blacks were so inferior and so poor. There was a big difference between the two.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
So thank you for giving us this opportunity again. So unless we discuss the true problem honestly, we are talking about coming together and, minimizing our differences, coming together as African, as a Black community, so that we can support each other. So my question is, do you think us coming from Africa, the perception and the conception that African Americans have towards us, is it because you are the ones who sold us to slavery, or is there any other, thing that will impact our relationship? This is the question for the panelists.
Anyone can, one of our panelists can answer.
I can explain more my question. For example, when it comes to African Americans accepting our culture, our tradition, from my experience, there is like, if you are from Africa, whatever you have is a little bit inferior than we have. I sense that, I have that experience. So unless we are honest and discuss towards our differences and come together, we are not going to be together.
Absolutely. Esther, can I call on you to take that question, if you don't mind? I think you're muted.
Hello. So that I understand the question, well, can you explain just one more time?
So, for example, what we are talking about is like some African Americans have a negative conception towards Africans? Is it because that you sold us to slavery, or is there anything else? Are they proud of, the African culture, the African heritage?
I think there's a couple things, in my opinion. There's several things that cause that. So there are some people that say, and I've heard that before too, those people, they sold us. And so I've heard it, and I guess because I don't have the African accent, I hear things on both sides. I feel like I live in both sides there and explain to bridge the gap in both. But there's a lack of understanding and a lack of awareness. And then from a media standpoint, something that I hate the most is the images on television are, and they're a little bit better now, but growing up, the images were of Tarzan. And so when I would say, oh, we're going to Ghana for the summer. Oh, you're going to go to the jungle and swing on the trees. So there's a negative image that's out there. And people don't relate that to something that they fully want to be associated with. Or if you see on TV, when they're asking for money for UNICEF, a lot of times they show the children with flies on their face. Mm-hmm. They don't show the Ghana National Theater. No one is showing that. Well, maybe they're showing it now because the African American, the museum that's in DC, that's patterned a bit after the Ghana National Theater, but they don't show you the greatness in rotation like they show you the children with the flies on the face, or they show you that Africans are starving, and they don't show the beautiful homes that are there, the homes that are double, triple, quadruple the size of the ones that are here in the United States. They don't show that people in general are happier in Africa. And yes, economically, sometimes not everyone is as affluent here, but here we have places that are more affluent, some that are less affluent. Mm-hmm. America, they don't show the better sides all the time. If you look on just the regular television news, it's usually people of color are doing some negative things, negative images, negative stereotypes, negativity of shown on lack of education. Same thing on the African side. They don't show that. So people here don't see as much a place of, or they haven't seen as much a place of, oh, wow, I got to go there. That place looks beautiful. So if they show it like they show, say, the clear beaches in the Bahamas as a destination travel resort, if they showed it like that in mass television, then everybody would say, oh, wow, I want to be African. I want to go to Africa. I want to be in Africa. But some of those things are concocted, slightly by design. And just on the African side, just watching the news at night in Ghana, just to see the newscasters on TV. And yes, America's getting a little bit better. But again, just over my lifetime, just growing up, I saw the people who looked like me doing the evening news. And they could look like me today. I have on a Ghana shirt, one of my favorite shirts. And this is what I wore to work. And I wear this type of stuff to work regularly, and it's no big deal. But in Ghana on the news, the person, she might have her hair straight today. It might be braided next week. She might have on a head wrap after that. She might have on Western clothing one day, the next day an African dress. And so it's a wide range of things. African television is different from what we see here. Even Nollywood is gaining mass recognition. It's been there for years and years and years. Everyone African knows about it, but those things aren't marketed to the rest of the world to say, hey, here's all your movies and here's all the people who look like you in a wide variety of settings, and just movies about everyday life, television shows about everyday life. And where the women you see on there might be your neighbors next door, down the street, your aunts, your cousins, your uncles, your grandparents, just regular people, just living life, going to work, raising families, positive images. those things aren't really shown as this is what Africa is. They only show the negative parts of Africa. So that affects people here wanting to go back and visit there. But in the 60s timeframe, with the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X's and the Kwame Nkrumahs, Marcus Garvey, some of those leaders, they were bridging the gap of going back to Africa, remembering your roots. And even I saw in 2019, the year of the return for Ghana. It was huge. There were so many people. They were so packed. But so some of those things are starting to reemerge, but that perception affects people's wanting to go back and seeing it as a favorable thing. So amongst ourselves, we have to promote it and encourage it. And so those are, it's dollars and it's resources and economics also, because the marketing part of it, if they say, go to Cancun, lay on the beach, you take your money for yourself and your family, your thousands of dollars, and you pour it into Cancun. And there's nothing wrong with Cancun, and it's great. But
thank you.
There's Labadi Beach in Ghana too. There's plenty of beaches in Africa. And so suppose if we all took those thousands of dollars every year, every couple of years, and we went to Africa to go visit, then we turn the dollar, we pump it into the economy.
Exactly.
You come back about your positive experiences.
Thank
so
you
on
very
and so
much.
forth. So
thank you very
sorry
much
for the long answer.
Thank you. Well,
no, awesome.
We're learning. Thank you very much. I believe, Sarah, you have a question. You want to go ahead and ask?
My name is Sarah from Nigeria. I want to ask, do you have a platform or programs that orientate the African Americans about the Africans? Because there are a lot of things that I've discovered that for the few Americans I've met that they don't know. Some of the Americans I've met some of them think Africa is a country, not a continent.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them think that way. I met a guy one day who in an elevator, he looked at me and said, I greeted him and he said, where are you from? You're definitely not from here. I said, no, I'm from Africa. Then he said, oh, I'm going to ask you a question. I said, feel free. He said, we have this impression that you Africans hate us. You know, we go through a lot of things here, racism and all that. I said, no, we don't hate you. We love you. We understand everything you've been going through, and we are in it with you. So please, do you have a forum or a TV program or anything that will help the African Americans, especially the younger generation, to know so much about Africa and where we are coming from, to let them know that we love them, we don't have anything against them, and change some of those orientations? Another experience I've had again with other friends who have complained is the fact that a lot of African Americans, beef Africans at their various places of work, they have this notion that, oh, you guys are coming to take over our jobs from us, because since you came into the scene, we don't get to have jobs. So please, I don't know if there's a forum or anything that is raised or, I don't know, to orientate the African Americans, especially the younger generation.
Well, Sarah, that's a good question. I'm going to ask Nanette and Jeff to partnership going on between the two organizations. So Jeff, I'm going to call on you just 2 minutes, and then Nanette, just to share all the things we have planned that's coming up for young people as well. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that's which is actually the reason why we wanted to have this conversation and see if whatever we come out of this will be able to give us a direction of where we need to go from here. And I think we, like Rinola said, we have a great interest in educating our young people. I think personally, and part of our program, we actually go to school and we do a lot of education to school. If you're a teacher and you want to have somebody come to talk to your kids about the African culture and maybe their history, we reach out and we have volunteers that can come and talk to your kids. But I think the most important thing, which I'm sure we'll be able to continue doing, is actually having a conversation also between the African American youth and the Africans immigrant youth, having a conversation where they can be able to learn and exchange ideas, but also giving a platform where they can ask those questions about the misconception also that we have. I would really want to follow up with Sarah and anybody who will be interested, because there is a lot that we have. If I'm looking at the conversation here on the chat, and I think this should have started long time ago.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yep.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Jake. Nanette, please. I'd like to share a few lines.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here. As Giselle said, I am the co-chair of the International Trends and Services Committee of our Archway chapter of the Links. And when we first met with the folks from Vitendo, this conversation, this came up pretty immediately about misconceptions and about the gap. We call it the elephant in the room. We all realize that there is this gap of understanding between our two cultures, especially for people who have not had the opportunity, for African Americans who've never had the opportunity to travel to Africa or spend much time with African people. But there's also, and that misconception affects the African immigrants. So we began this conversation, and tonight is the first step. Tonight is step number one. We want to continue this conversation, and we want to hear from you. What other things can we talk about? Should we talk about economics? I mean, I love this idea of why aren't we as African Americans investing more in African countries? Just like Esther just talked about, why don't we go to vacation there? Why don't we do more things? So I think we can talk about economics. We can talk about youth. There are many, many topics for us to tackle. And we also don't want to be small. We don't want to think small. We want to start this conversation here in St. Louis, but we want to take this conversation across the country. We have links organizations all over the world, actually, and we want to continue this because this could be a major building block for our cultures. So that's what we're doing, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear what more do you want to know, and how we can incorporate that into future programs.
Okay.
And
to that, you know what? Can I say one thing just to piggyback on you? I want to say to Esther, because she's in Chicago, and I want to know, what can we do in Chicago? Because, you talk about Whitney Young. I have a nephew and a niece-in-law that graduated from there. There might have been a class behind you. So I've helped to educate Jamaican Americans, Jamaican African. I don't even know how to link us into this culture. And I need to know what we can do here, because I have a lot of friends that are like educators and healthcare, like doctors that African American or with African ancestry that would want to be a part of a group. And how can we incorporate this and grow it in the Chicagoland and be a part of the bigger picture? What can I apologize for, I have a little Yorkie that think he owns me, so I'm sorry. But Esther, I would love to connect with you and see how we can move forward in growing this, because as I said, I want to be a part. I am a link. As the ship went to the Americas, they drop us off. Yes, I tell people we were one of the most rebellious groups that they had to throw overboard. And we're still a rebellious group that want to fight for that. And I don't think Jamaicans look at it like Africans sold us. We still see ourselves as African, Jamaican, associated with that. And we want to be a part of it. And we want to be the linkage that we can grow and be better for the kids coming behind us, the grandkids coming behind us. And I can't say the dog that has no manners. You know, but we got to go forward. We got to move before I pass.
Okay.
We got to get this done. We must get this done.
Thank you, Pauline.
I'm tired of the talking. The blueprint should have been there and we should have been digging the basement by now. Okay? I want to see the building.
Thank you,
sorry.
No, you don't be. We have started and we don't intend to stop. And yes, you and Esther can interact. For Jeff and Nanette, Gillette, they are great resources. So we're all here to work with you and to make sure that we keep the conversation going. So feel free to reach out, and you can share the number on the chat as well. I have a question from Bella. Go ahead.
I was going to say, can I just, a small thing?
Yes, please.
And so I'm mostly in Chicago now. Prior to COVID, I was in St. Louis and Chicago. It's just, I don't do much anymore because of COVID. But, and also before COVID, there's a group for children to learn about the Ghana heritage in Chicago. It's called Black Star Seed Nation.
Yes.
And, I've enrolled my kid in it, and my friends have their kids in it so that the children don't get too far away from the culture. But within, and I can only speak to Ghana in Chicago, but there's several Ghanaian organizations, just or tribal organizations, but just as a whole, there's a Greater Ghana Association. There's Ghana Fest that's every year in St. Louis. There's a Ghanaian association too. They have events a couple times a year. Well, pre-COVID anyway, maybe post-COVID. Those kind of things. But they're networks, and I can speak to Ghana, but in St. Louis, there's a camaraderie amongst all Africans. And so I know I've gone to other events for other African friend country mates for like Sierra Leone or Nigerian, Ivorian. So there's some different things like that you can go to continue to be a part of the culture, and then take the children with you. So then the children grow up and they get used to seeing the culture, eating the food, dressing in the clothing. So then it becomes normal to them. And then that's how you pass it on from one generation to the next generation, and that it's normal. And then you keep the language going too. Even in our household with my nephew, there's some things, he can't just say good night. He's got to say it in Tree. Or, you want some food? How do you say you want some food in Tree? Do you really want some food? Okay. But we do that on a regular basis. He has groundnut stew, but just on a general basis, just me as a person, I like my culture. And so I let everybody that knows me know I like my culture. And even on food, people haven't heard of some of the things before, but in some of my coworkers, they ask, well, what is that? It smells good. Oh, that's jollof rice. Well, here, I make it, I'll bring you some. So I've done that before, where I brought, containers for everybody to taste it. And then that shares the culture. Oh, this is jollof rice. And I know there's the jollof wars between the Africans, but overall, jollof rice. And I've done that to some other African type food and shared some recipes. So those are the kind of things that just keep the culture going. Or when I was in Ghana pre-COVID, July of 2019 was the last time I went, just going and sharing my pictures on social media. And I didn't realize how many people, and I don't have thousands of friends, but people who were looking at the pictures, and that's just me, just going to visit the aunts and the uncles and the cousins, and just pictures on a day-to-day. And a lot of the people were like, wow, thanks for sharing your trip with me. Thanks for sharing your culture with me. Thanks for sharing Ghana with me. And so there's a lot of other fellow Africans who you just talk to, and they'll tell you what they'll know, and then they'll pass.
Madam Moderator.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah. May I make a comment and also a question?
Can I just interject before he does that? Because I just want us just to multitask while we do it. So I'm going to just ask, one of the things that Nanette had said, I just want to dovetail on that, and we wanted to capture it, is that this is the first session that we're doing, and we want to do more. You've heard us say that. But what we want you to do in the chat is, what else would you like to hear in regard to the topic of misconceptions, because today's topic, we chose to focus on history. So we really want the audience participation that we've been getting. But if you could please put it in the chat in terms of what areas of misconception you'd like to speak about. Like, for example, Pat had mentioned the shame part. Maybe we want to talk about why shame exists, and things of that sort. So while the gentleman is actually asking his question, if everyone else could take the time now in the chat to add what else you'd like to hear from this particular forum so that we can continue it, I would appreciate it and be delighted. And Ariola, for about 5 minutes or so we have until we transition to the next part.
Awesome.
Okay,
Awesome.
Madam,
Okay.
Madam Chair Lady.
Okay, you go ahead, and then after you, I'm going to read the question from Bella. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, Africans, as I am, never tired saying thank you. Thank you to Jeff. I know him personally, and thank you, the panel. One observation I wish to make is that are there any cross-cultural marriage people on the planet? For instance, I mean, an African married to an African American. Is there any?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello?
Go on.
Good.
Oh, on the panel.
Okay. That's good.
Yes.
That's good.
So,
And I want, it's
go
okay.
ahead.
I want to commend the lady at WashU. I think even us as Africans, we've missed out in the real history of our people. An advice to the African American: next time when you visit America, don't just go stay in the city. Culture, the custodians of the culture are the chiefs, and that takes place in the villages. So go to the villages, mingle with them, eat with them, dine with them, and also learn from them. And then as far as the here is concerned, I've lived in this country, I'm from Gambia. I hate to say I am from this place or the other. What I generally say is I'm a Pan-Africanist. That's what Nkrumah, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Awolowo, I grew up during those times. That's what they taught us. Unfortunately, the Africans today have been brainwashed. In fact, some of you Africans go back and be elite within and among your people. You look down on them. So we need them to be awakened. We need to come back to who we are. We should be prideful, like Nkrumah gave us. We should be prideful as being an African. I am African in my very blood. I've over 20 years been working with African Americans and Africans. I see them as my brothers and sisters. So aside from all this negativity, let me advise you, let's get along. Let's get along. Don't emphasize on the negativity or the prejudices. If we continue, we're buying into the white man's philosophy of divide and rule. I thank you, Jeff. I thank you. And I thank the other group that joined with you. Again, my name is Dr. Loom from the Gambia. God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Leung from Gambia. So we're going to move on to Bella's question. African Americans in the US are by far the wealthiest African group in the world. They have the power to transform the motherland as well as chart the narrative of all Africans due to its economic power. Is there a way recent African Americans, immigrants, can benefit from the African American business knowledge on how to maneuver the USA business system? We recent immigrants find it a challenge setting up businesses, etc., because we come into the USA not knowing underlying tones that only African Americans can help and educate us on. That's somehow true. Sylvia, I'm going to call on you to take that question.
Can you just repeat the question for me? I'm sorry.
Okay, the question is, is there a way recent African American immigrants can benefit from the African American business knowledge on how to maneuver the USA business system? Because we come in here and we don't quite understand the tone or how things are done.
Absolutely. There's a way, and we should be benefiting from that. We should be, but like Dr. Dr. Loom said, if we are fighting against each other, if we're not on the same page, then I come in thinking I cannot reach out to my African American brother or sister to guide me on what I need to do. I may feel like I'm a little bit better. They may feel like they're a little bit better. So that misconception may bring the division whereby we should actually be together and helping each other. So yes, I think that is something that is doable, and that's why we are doing this, so we can all be, support each other and be on the same page.
Absolutely. And if I just add to that, I know there's a lot of things that you don't know or don't quite understand when you come into a new space. I know I struggle with understanding networking, what it means, how to do it, what am I supposed to say, just little things like that, because it's just not how we do business, where I was coming from. But one good thing we have now is the partnership. We have Nintendo for Africa, and they are really geared to helping build tomorrow's leaders. And we work together pretty well.
I'd like to add something to that. I find when Africans come to America, the ones who are very successful in business and navigating an American corporate world are those who have alliances with Americans, whatever. I don't care if they're black or white. When they have alliances with Americans, they are successful. The problem with a lot of Africans who are unsuccessful in America is they find the microcosms of Africa in America. And so that is the problem. They are in their own groups, meaning Ghanaians only talking to Ghanaians, Nigerians only talking to Nigerians, Gambians only talking to Gambians. And so those are the ones who are most challenged.
Thank you.
I'm an exception.
I tend to disagree with that statement, being Jamaican, because I just came into a situation. I'm in sales for one of the largest pharmaceutical company, and I'm on a team of 11 people, 2 African American. I've always been the first African American, Jamaican American, or of African descendants on any team. And you look at it and say, why? Why is she always the first? Is it because I'm easier to assimilate into, or they think to assimilate, which they learn it's not true, because I'm one of the most rebellious that exists. And we have a situation within my corporation that they're trying to look at equity right now. And I have an African-American brother on the team. And I was so disappointed. I've been disappointed in him since I met him, which is sad. And a girlfriend of mine say, he shuffled good. I don't know if you understand what shuffling means. It's like Black in slavery, the Black that say, yes, Amasa, let's do it. We do everything and all of that. And we were having an equity meeting, and I'm like, what is this meeting about? I knew what I wanted to say. I knew that there was nothing I could do to change because the majority was there. I could put my voice in there as an someone from Africa and know what the inequity looked like, the disparity looked like. And I had a conversation with him because he wanted to meet one of the biggest doctor in Chicago, Black doctor, and he knew it was a friend of mine. And he called me for the help. And I said to him, hey, we have this meeting. What do you think? And he told me how Black he was, and all of that. I'm like, wow, I think we have a group going in. Oh my God, I'm happy. I went on that call and this guy shuffles so good. He talked about how much he could sit down with a KKK member and he could understand his view. I was done. I cried that night so badly.
That's amazing.
Well, I don't know why that would bother you. When I see Black people voting for Trump and going along with this Republican ideology, I'm having a problem. That's more of a problem. Because it's leading to all of us, not just Black folks, down the wrong way. Everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry about that for those of you who are Republican.
Yeah. So I was on that call and I remember one of my white counterparts said, I don't see color. And I'm like, oh, please, that's the biggest misconception anybody can see. They don't see color. You walk into a room, you see color. It's what you do with the color when you see it and how you deal with it. And this guy shuffles so well that I was so embarrassed.
I am sorry, Pauline. I'm going to have to interrupt you because we are at time and we did want to allow Jeffrey the opportunity to close us out, and we do like to end in a timely fashion. No, it's okay. Jeffrey, we'd like to turn it over to you, please.
All right, thank you so much. I want to take this chance. I see we are exactly at 8. And I think looking at the conversation the way it is, it looks like we can go on and on and on and on. This means that we need more of this conversation. And I think the team will sit down back again and put it together, another forum. I want to take this chance to thank all our panelists for the great work. I want to say thank you also for everyone who tuned in. 1 hour and 30 minutes is an investment that I know if we all take something from this meeting and go and do something about it, we will be able to touch the change. Like I said on the chat, the movement starts with small group like you. And I think if we can go do that, I hear people talking about Chicago, and I think the next thing we're gonna be Texas. So it's that small. It's that small, and you never know how much you can do just by being intentional and doing something little by little, and I think we'll be able to change. What I'll challenge, and I'll say everybody, reach out, check your list of friends, try to add somebody. If you are looking for a Kenyan, count on me, I'm gonna be your friend.
Gambian too.
If you want to look for a Gambian, I think we have one on the list. So I think what we do is that be intentional and add a list of friends in your list. Because when somebody talks about negative about Kenya and you know me, then you're going to know they're talking about me and you're going to stand up and correct them.
Very good.
So if we can be able to do that, and I think let's see if you have a way that you can connect with people. There is an event. I hear Ghanaian, they have an event going on. Just go show up and attend. When we have these forums, I mentioned there, we normally have Building Momentum speaker series. If you're on the list and you share, I put my email there. You want to follow up, or go to our website on the events page. You will be able to see a couple of events coming up. If you have a youth, tomorrow, we have another forum for the youth between the age of 12 all the way to 29. We invite them to join. There is a group going to Kenya in June. If the COVID things allows, we want to invite as many African Americans, as many Ghanaian, Congolese. Let them go and have an experience in Africa. And when they come back, they will be able to be different because of that global experience. Other than that, I would say thank you so much. And like everybody else said, let's take the challenge and reach out.
Thank you.
My My name is Nicholas Ngige.
My name is Sebastian.
I am Patavi. I'm Grace Maringanga. I'm Ruth.
Diane Stevenson.
Jen McGaddy.
Samuel Kadewa.
Christina Vivet.
Safi Uizeye.
Jaja Uizeye.
Agatha Kinethia.
Faiza.
Dr. John Mwangi.
My name is DeAndrea Weeks, and I am with Virginia for Africa.
I am with Nintendo for Africa. I am with Nintendo for Africa. And I am with
Nintendo for Africa.
I am with
I am with
I am with
Nintendo for Africa.